May 1945. Despite colossal destruction from the war, the will to survive among the population of Berlin is unbroken. Goods from the black market and hoarded supplies supplement the meager rations. The Berliners have to queue for everything. Everything is in short supply, including electrical power. Bewag workers repair extensive damage to the power lines under extremely difficult conditions. Often, only makeshift repairs can be made. All of the Bewag power stations have survived the war with little damage, but power is nonetheless rationed for two reasons. Coal is scarce, and Soviet troops have dismantled the modern installations, especially in what will later be the western sectors of the city. The complete dismantling of the Kraftwerk West power station alone means that West Berlin loses 70% of its generating capacity. In June 1948, the currency reform in the three west sectors leads to the political division of the city. The Soviet response is a complete blockade of all these sectors. All access routes via land and sea are cut off. Power and fuel supplies from the east are stopped. At the same time, the Bewag is also divided up. The administration has to move from the Soviet sector to the Shell building in Tiergarten and is faced with the challenge of supplying West Berlin with what little generating facilities are left. The American and British powers quickly organize an airlift, flying in all essential commodities to West Berlin, including coal for the power stations. The airlift develops into a gigantic masterly feat of logistics, keeping the city alive. 1,500 tons of boiler and machinery parts are also flown in via the airlift for the reconstruction of the Kraftwerk West, ordered by the British authorities. The airlift works both ways. Despite the shortage of power, goods made in West Berlin are flown out to West Germany. Ernst Reuter delivers his unforgettable appeal to the conscience of the free world in front of the ruins of the Reichstag.
Schaut auf diese Stadt und erkennt, dass ihr diese Stadt und dieses Volk nicht preisgeben dürft, nicht preisgeben könnt.
Through the help of the Allied powers and the resilience of the West Berliners, the blockade ultimately fails. On May the 12th, 1949, the Soviets lift the blockade. 6 months later, the first stage of the new Kraftwerk West is ready for operation. Power rationing ends, and all of the power stations in Berlin once again feed into a common power supply. To be ready in case of possible cut-offs in the future, the Bewag prepares itself for supplying West Berlin with electricity in insular operation. On March the 4th, 1952, this hypothetical situation becomes reality. The load dispatching center in East Berlin informs the Bewag that the power connection to West Berlin has to be cut due to technical problems. From this point on, for over 40 years, the Bewag supplies West Berlin with electricity in insular operation. Beginning in the 1950s, the power stations are compelled to increase output to meet rising power consumption demands. At the power stations Reuter, formerly West, Charlottenburg, Moabit and Steglitz, new units are installed, mainly as combined heating and power blocks. Summer 1961. Before the eyes of the world, Berlin's insular situation is made permanent by the war. 172 Bewag workers in the east are unable to go to their jobs in West Berlin. The Hamburg Power Utility spontaneously sends specialists to help. Political isolation slows down, but cannot stop West Berlin's economic and social progress. President J.F. Kennedy pays his respects to the walled-off yet upsurging city in his speech.
And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
In 1965, the extension of the Rudow power station, which supplies the newly built district Gropiusstadt with district heating, means that the Bewag has a combined output capacity of over 1,000 megawatts. West Berlin's power requirements grow. The Reuter power station is extended to become a cornerstone of West Berlin's power supply. The makeshift technology of the past years at the Bewag headquarters is replaced by an ultra-modern load dispatching center. Process control by computer helps keep fuel costs as low as possible and exploit expensive primary fuels such as coal and heavy fuel oil to the full. Load dispatch. Under the difficult circumstances of insular operation, this means ensuring that power generation and power consumption are kept constantly in balance, a necessity of physics. The frequency, a sensitive physical quantity in electricity supply, reacts to any disturbance in this balance. To keep the frequency of 50 Hz as constant as possible, the generated power and the fluctuating consumption level are kept in balance by rapid control machinery. In large superimposed grids, this does not present a problem, but in West Berlin's insular grid, sufficient reserves must be available at all times to counteract any drop in the frequency due to any failure in one of the power stations. The steam turbines from two Roots generators dating from 1929 are kept in operation to provide reserves of 20,000 kilowatt each for the main supply during peak load times. To further safeguard the power supply, the Bewag develops a compact system for base load supply and high-speed ignition gas turbines to cover medium and peak load supply whose performance is equal to that of a supra-regional grid. At the beginning of the 70s, the newly built oil-fired Lichterfelde power station goes into operation with a generating capacity of 450 megawatts. Two projects to set up a grid between West Germany and Poland and West Germany and the USSR respectively are vetoed by East Germany because West Berlin is included in the plans. In its plans for future development in the expanding city, the Bewag is forced to continue under the technological and economic drawbacks of insular operation. Two water-cooled 380 kilovolt oil cable systems are laid as a bulk power connection between the substations Reuter and Mitte. To this end, using an environment-friendly technique, a tunnel is bored under the Schlosspark Charlottenburg. The old Wilmersdorf power station is replaced by a new gas turbine combined heating and power station. All this has its price. As well as the rising costs of primary fuels, the outlay for environment protection is high. The Bewag decides to carry out an extensive modernization program. All steam power stations are fitted with highly effective flue gas cleaning systems. Due to the constraints of insular operation, these have to be installed while the power plants are in operation. In the following 10 years, about 3,000 million Deutschmarks are invested to reduce fuel emission from the power plants to below the legally permissible levels. In late 1987, the new Reuter West combined heating and power station goes into operation. Two 300 megawatt blocks are used, both for reasons of economy and to utilize space to an optimum. To meet the special requirements of insular operation, precautions have to be taken to prevent any shortages in the power supply due to failure in one of the blocks. In Moabit, construction begins on the new heating block A, which will utilize the relatively new technology of circulating fluidized bed combustion. Block 2 in Lichterfelde is converted to use low pollution natural gas. As a result of the reduction of tension between East and West Germany, treaties are signed in 1988 for the construction of a power line from West Germany to West Berlin and the supply of 1,000 million kilowatt hours to both East Germany and West Berlin. However, before the treaties can come into effect, they gain new dimensions by the reunification of Germany. In 1990, the VEB Energiekombinat Berlin, which was formerly the East Bewag, is converted into the Energieversorgung Berlin AG, and in 1994 it merges with the Bewag to become one company. After over 40 years, this marks a new beginning. The electric circuit between the divided city at last begins to close again. There is still a great deal to be done. The necessary refurbishment of power stations and substations in East Berlin and the conversion of power stations to energy-efficient, low-pollution heat and power co-generators requires capital expenditure to the extent of several thousand million marks. To connect the two power supply systems, an interlink is planned by the Bewag. The 380 kilovolt overhead line from Helmstedt to Berlin is to be extended from the city boundary at Spandau to the Reuter transformer station. Contrary to these plans, however, the connection has to be laid underground from the new switching station at Teufelsbruck on. The most expensive phase of this undertaking is the construction of a tunnel under the river Havel. Over a distance of 540 meters, concrete pipes higher than a man are pressed into and under the river bed with extreme precision. Then, 20-meter-long sections of plastic piping, which will be used to carry water to cool the 380 kilovolt power cables, are welded together and fed into the tunnel as one long pipe. In the further course of the pipeline, the cooling pipes are laid underground before the power cable is drawn through. The additional costs incurred from laying underground cables instead of using overhead lines, as was originally intended, is approximately 385 million marks. This additional expenditure also has consequences in the Bewag scheduling. As a result, the connection to the European grid was not possible in 1992 as planned. With an unchanged generating capacity of 2,500 megawatts, the Bewag takes steps to safeguard the power supply against possible shortages. On December the 1st, 1992, after 40 years of separate mains, a 110 kilovolt emergency connection is made between the supply districts in East and West Berlin. By this means, reserve capacities via the East Berlin mains supplied by the Bewag can be drawn upon immediately in case of any failure in the Bewag power supply. This technological measure simultaneously gains symbolic importance. At the end of the blockade, Ernst Reuter said,
Am Ende dieser Periode wird die Wiedervereinigung Berlins mit ganz Deutschland und die Wiedervereinigung auch Ostdeutschlands mit dem übrigen Vaterland stehen.
Ernst Reuter's visionary prediction is fulfilled for the Bewag in October 1994, when the last assembly work on the pylon at the Berlin city boundary is completed, and the overhead line between East and West is connected. As part of a ceremonial function on December the 7th, the governing mayor of the new federal capital can proclaim,
Dieser Tag macht deutlich, dass wir einen wichtigen Schritt in Berlin.
We shall need a great deal of energy for the development of this city. In a figurative sense also.
Für die Entwicklung dieser Stadt brauchen wir noch viel Energie.
And today shows that we have that energy for the regeneration of the region Berlin, Brandenburg, for the industry, for the jobs in our city.
Berlin-Brandenburg, der Wirtschaft, der Arbeitsplätze.
For these reasons, I congratulate the Bewag on this day, in this hour of its connection to the grid. And I am glad that Berlin now really does belong to the mainland.
Preparations are made in the central switching station at Wolmirstedt, at the Bewag main switching center in Marzahn, and at the Bewag load dispatching center at Tiergarten. The exciting moment when the button is pressed for connection to the national grid moves nearer and nearer. Even the old route storage units at Charlottenburg come into action to align the Bewag and Bewag mains to one another. An encapsulated high-tension switch will complete the operation with a loud bang. And after all switching stations have given the all-clear, the time has come.
Mr. Governor Mayor, please switch on line 494 at the Teufelsbruch substation. That was it. Berlin is no longer an island.
Bewag, power and heating for Berlin.